Hey, ¿qué tal amigos? Stuart here from Spain Speaks. Today we're going to be looking at salaries in Spain, and in particular an article that was in the press yesterday, and it's talking about salaries in Europe, and it gives a comparison between some of the other European countries and of course, salaries here in Spain. So we'll have a look at that today, and it could be interesting if you're considering coming to Spain to work, obviously. So we'll have a look at that today. Now, as we can see here, it's from a newspaper called Expansión. It was in another paper called El Mundo as well, but those papers belong to the same publishing group, so obviously that's the reason why it was in both. And the headline of the article is ¿Por qué se cobra menos en España? Basically, that translates to why do people get paid less in Spain? And they've got a ranking of all of the different European countries with the average wage per hour or the average salary per hour that people make in the different countries. And we can see here from the chart that, for example, Norway is the place where people get paid the most per hour. 41.9 euros per hour. Now, I don't know whether these figures are gross figures or net figures. I think they're gross figures, because if we go down to Spain, we can see here that the average price per hour of a salary in Spain is 15.8 euros. So basically, that's the type of money that we're talking about here for a salary. Now remember that these are average salaries, so you have to take into account all of the people that make big salaries, all the people that make lower salaries, and of course the amount in between. So basically, the article goes through and discusses a couple of the points as to why salaries in Spain are lower than in the Northern European countries, let's say. It's quite clear that in the other Southern European countries, Portugal, Greece, Malta, for example, except for Italy, Spain is a country where you can make more money per hour, but we can see here that Norway, Denmark, Luxembourg, Belgium, the Netherlands, Ireland, Finland, Sweden, Germany, Austria, France, the Eurozone, okay, 21.8 euros per hour in the Eurozone, UK 21.4, Italy 20.3, EU average 19, and Spain 15.82. All right. Then if we go down to the countries below Spain, if we go all the way down to the bottom, we can see Bulgaria 3.4 euros an hour, Romania, Lithuania, Latvia, Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Estonia, Croatia, Portugal, Greece, etc. So Portugal, for example, 10.5 euros per hour. Now, the first thing they point out is that obviously cost of living in Spain a lot less than in Norway or Denmark, for example. Therefore, that could be one of the reasons for the lower wages, the cost of living. Now, I've put other videos online where I talk about the cost of living. I went into a supermarket, so you can see that video as well. So you get an idea more or less of what the prices are like in Spain. So that's one point that they put forward as to why salaries are lower. Lower salaries, lower cost of living. The second point they make regards productivity. You can also see here in the ranking here that the productivity per hour, Spain is also in the middle of the table. It's above the European average, but more or less they say there's a correlation between your productivity and your salary, okay? Which seems to make sense, obviously. Another point they make is that salaries in Spain are low only if you compare them to the northern countries. If you compare them to Romania, Bulgaria, as we saw, salaries are quite good. And that also leads to the fact that there's a lot of people from those countries coming to countries like Spain. There's a big Romanian community here that are obviously making more money here than they would be able to do back home. So that's also another aspect of the European Union, that a lot of these lower salary countries, people are still emigrating and going to look for work in the other countries. And that happens with Spanish people as well. A lot of Spanish professionals that can't get work here go to look for jobs in Germany, go to look for jobs in the northern and the Nordic countries where obviously salaries are higher and their jobs are more appreciated as well, let's say. Another thing they point out is the size of Spanish companies. Spain doesn't have a lot of big companies, and by big companies I mean 250 plus workers. So they say in the article that 90% of Spanish companies are what they call micro pymes or micro SMEs. In other words, companies with around 200 people or less. A lot of companies only have 10, 15, 20 workers, and obviously that's going to affect salaries at the end of the day as well. 27.6% of the Spanish population is employed by big companies. So if you compare that to the USA, according to the article, nearly 60% of people work in big companies. In the UK, it's about 40%, Spain 26.7%, and the rest of the population are working in the smaller type companies that obviously don't have the same turnover as some of those big companies. So need to keep that in mind as well. Another thing they mention relates to the unemployment rate. Spain is still sitting at an official unemployment rate of around 20%. So obviously there's a supply and demand question coming in here as well. Salaries don't need to increase because there's an abundance of people willing to take those jobs. So therefore the competitiveness of the job market isn't there. So therefore salaries are not being forced to increase. And they say that if you compare that with Germany, which only has a 4.2% unemployment rate, then obviously there's a lot more competition in the marketplace, leading to higher salaries to get the best professionals, let's say. It's always interesting to read the comments that we can see attached to these articles as well, to see what the general population or the people that comment on these videos talk about. Some of the comments range from the fact that there's a huge difference between executive salaries and normal worker salaries. In some places they say that executives only make 3 or 4 times the average salary, but here in Spain it can be sometimes 10 times the average salary for the managers of the top companies. You could debate that fact as well, perhaps. They also talk about the public sector. A lot of people here saying that the public sector is too big. Another person also mentions the labor costs in Spain. There's a lot of cost involved with hiring people, also firing people as well. High social security costs, which you need to keep in mind when it comes to net salaries. Another person says that Spanish people don't sell themselves very well. They go into a job interview and say, we're going to pay you €1,000, and the average person just says, okay, thanks. So they don't try and push for higher salaries. That's what somebody here also mentioned. Another person mentioned the bad reputation that business people have, and in the last few years, during all of the corruption scandals, a lot of these business people have come under the spotlight for their dodgy practices. In fact, a couple of the leaders of some of the most important business associations are now in jail, and a couple of the other ones are on trial in some of the big corruption scandals, as I said. So there's a whole list of reasons why salaries are what they are in Spain, but running through the highlights of the article, firstly the productivity rate, unemployment level, not very many big companies in Spain, so a lot of the times you're going to be working for a company with 10, 15, 20 workers, maybe 50 workers max. Therefore, the profits of those companies are not going to be overly huge, which means they can't pay a lot of money to their workers. Again, from personal experience, the cost of hiring people is quite high in Spain. I remember back in the day that if I wanted to pay somebody €1,000 net, you had to put another 400 or 500 euros on top of that for tax and social security costs. So there are those costs involved as well. So that's one of the reasons why salaries are not as high in Spain as other countries. But speaking from personal experience, I will say that more or less, if you're able to make 16, 17, 1800 euros a month net, you should be able to live okay considering the prices that we have here. Rent, supermarket prices, general cost of living is reasonably in line with those salaries. So that's all I have for you today. Remember to leave a question or a comment below if you have one, and I'll see you in the next video. Hasta luego.